Today's today's BD webinar is on cross-selling and how to win more business from existing clients. And the reason why I put this together and thought about doing this right now, many clients, many contacts, many people I've been speaking to over the past 6-9 months or so have been observing, feeling that it's been more challenging, more difficult to win net new business. So I've really been thinking about how do we win more from our existing clients? How can we maybe upsell, cross-sell? How can we do more business with them? Roll forward 6-7 months or so, a number of those have been saying, actually, we're finding that quite hard. We're not getting the traction that we thought, and we're not quite sure why. So I thought I'd do a session on it to see if we can uncover some of the barriers and unhook this and unlock some of that revenue potential for organizations. So, but for those who aren't as familiar with me or who I don't know as well, so to introduce myself, Darren Spevick, Managing Director of Russell Strategy Partners. The last 20-something years, been heavily involved in building teams, growing clients, selling, winning, delivering services across Europe and North America. 2022, I set up Russell Strategy Partners, and over the last 3 years or so, really been working with a wide range of business and professional service firms to help them be better at and transform their approach to BD. And that really is our purpose. But what does that mean? To give you some examples, so clients we've worked with over the last 12 months, these have been some of the things that they've seen in terms of their business. One client has seen a 70% increase in revenue. A number of people we've been mentoring have had promotions based on their performance. We've seen pipelines being developed from existing accounts and overall an increase in BD activity. So that's what we mean when we're talking about better business development. It's about how do we win more business, whether it's from existing clients, new clients, it's bringing more business in. So just to give some context and background. If I can ask you to get your mobile phone ready and to scan that QR code, or if you haven't got your mobile phone, go to menti.com and use that code. I just want to do a quick poll and get some context to understand kind of where you feel you're at with your businesses. So if you can, any problems with that QR code, do let me know. And throughout the session, I do want this to be interactive, so feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat or come off mute and ask a question so that you can get as much out of this as possible as well. But have a go at scanning that QR code and I'll bring up the poll in a moment. So the first question we're asking is your business successfully cross-selling? Very few saying yes, few are saying definitely no, and a majority saying in some parts. That's probably what I was expecting to see. So now, maybe in your own words, I'd be just interested to understand or get your view as to, why is your business not cross-selling as effectively, as well as you would hope or would like it to be? Is there anything that stands out for you that you've observed that's getting in the way? Feel free. It's anonymous, so feel free to share your comments. Keen to see what people are thinking. So lack of awareness, lack of feedback loop, lack of client engagement. Most don't feel they can ask for referrals. Okay. Lack of team synergy. No incentives. Okay. And lots of factors there. Lack of trusted partners, lack of market support. Great. Thank you. Let me go back to the presentation. Bear with me 1 second. So what I'm going to do now, let's give some more context and go through some thoughts and share some ideas with you. So when we think of cross-selling, a definition of involves the selling of an additional product or service to an existing customer. Would anybody disagree with that? Anybody have any different views or thoughts on what cross-selling means? Just hopefully not. And I think the theory of cross-selling is so simple. These are things I will often hear within organizations. Existing clients, they already know you, they like you, they trust you. So in theory, should be more likely to buy more from you. Should be easier and quicker and cheaper to sell more to existing clients than to win new clients. And why do we want to do this? It de-risks our relationship. So we're not exposed to just one area of the client's business. So we can become sticky with them across the organization, deepen our relationship with them. Those are often, there are lots of reasons and rationales for why companies want to go down and want to expand and cross-sell with organizations. So why is it so difficult? The theory is simple, but the reality is, as per some of your comments a moment ago, it's actually quite difficult. And what if you don't try? What if people within your organization, what if companies don't have a strategy to cross-sell? You will miss opportunities. Your competitors, they are trying, and some of them are going to succeed. And you might lose those relationships, and that is extremely frustrating. Nothing is worse than hearing that a client has gone to market or brought in a competitor to do a job that you could have done, but you didn't get the opportunity, you weren't aware of it, or you've lost that relationship because someone else has been working behind the scenes to nurture that. So we want to avoid that situation happening. So over the next kind of 15-20 minutes, going to explore some of the barriers, what's getting in the way, some of the things that you guys have already mentioned, maybe explore those in a bit more detail, have a look at some of the tried and maybe failed strategies that companies have in place when it comes to cross-selling. I'm going to share with you some ideas and tips to how your businesses may approach this in a better way. So the first thing I see in many organizations, or don't see, is that there is often a lack of strategy when it comes to cross-selling. This could be at an organizational level, right from the top and filtering down, or it could be at a very local level, dealing with a specific account or specific team or business unit area. There may not be much of a plan or strategy as to, well, how are we actually going to do this? So people are wondering, well, what do I do? How do we go about, what's the idea? They don't know. They're lacking direction and focus. So having a lack of strategy is holding some organizations back. I was with somebody yesterday and they said to me, but it takes time to put that together. So, well, you're either trying to win more business from your existing clients or you're spending time trying to win business from new clients. So you're still going to be investing that time. So where's that time going to be best spent? So think about, do we have a strategy and how are we going to approach this? The next factor I see very commonly in organizations are, they are operating in silos. If you're in a law firm, you've got different practices. If you're in a consulting organization or a business service firm, maybe you've got different business units. Often these parts of the business can be working in isolation of each other and really do have this silo mentality. Whereas in reality, oops, sorry, going the wrong way. What we want to try to do is move it towards this environment where there is some crossover, there is some synergy, and we're working together. I had an interesting conversation with the CEO of a multi-service firm a while ago, and he agreed with lots of the things in principle, but he was really stuck on this one and said he actually wants his teams working in silos. And his rationale was, I want people to be focused. I don't want them to be distracted by other business areas. So that's great, but they are going to miss opportunities. So I think it's good to be focused, but you don't want to be blinkered. So you still want to be aware of other things and can bring those forward. So there's a very interesting discussion on how to get that balance right between silos and getting some natural crossover. Then I see in organizations, internal relationships aren't being invested in, aren't being nurtured. Are we really identifying who are the best people within our business that we could marry up with? Where is there a synergy between our services, between our clients? Where is it more natural for us to be able to help each other? A lot of time people aren't investing in those internal relationships anywhere near as much as they could be. So I think people are all missing out on opportunities as a result of that. And there could be many reasons behind that. One could be, potentially, is there a team, is there a person who internally has a very poor reputation, and as a result, people don't feel comfortable to refer business or bring them into their organizations, into their clients. So is there a reputational aspect that is holding people back? Another big factor is saying, well, actually, a lot of people don't know what else their colleagues do, and maybe their colleagues don't know what you do. What value do you bring? What problems are you solving for clients? So people generally or often aren't aware of the different services, the different offerings, understanding what, where, and how they may be able to bring those opportunities forward. So really asking that question, what do you do? Do we understand that enough? Then I come across individuals who are very defensive, very protective over their relationships. And they really do hold on to that, and they're not going to let anybody into it, no matter what you try. So it's how do we work with them? How do we find a way to that? How do we bring them on that journey? But that can be a real common barrier that is getting in the way of making those referrals and looking for those other opportunities. Then you come across relationships where it can feel like it's all take and no give. There may be some people in the organization who are very happy to take on referrals that you can bring to them, for you can bring business to them, helps their numbers, helps their reward at the end of the day, but they never give anything back. And eventually that can become a bit draining on the people involved, and eventually you may well stop asking the question or trying to help them, because it really, like any relationship, it really should be two-way. But that can be a common factor that we see. And all of that brings up to a lack of trust within the organization, within your colleagues. If I don't trust my colleagues, if I don't trust the way they're going to operate, then I'm less likely to refer and introduce them to my clients and hand that over. So we want to make sure is the level of trust there. Another big factor that we often see is what's in it for me. If we're going to ask people to go out there to create and find new opportunities, people will want some motivation for that. Does it affect me? Does it affect my numbers? Does it affect me from a financial point of view? Is there some kind of reward mechanism? Incredibly powerful and can be an incredibly big blocker that will stop people doing things if there isn't some form of reward mechanism in place. But many organizations I've come across say, well, we have a formula, we have a reward factor. I was with a CEO of actually a recruitment company a while ago, said, oh, we have this in place. And I said, okay, that's great. Well, so how much have you paid out on that? And how often are you dealing with those? And he said, well, actually, we haven't paid out on it at all this year. And when we understood the formula, I said, that's incredibly complicated. That's not motivational. No one is coming forward with that. That's not helping you. That is really hindering you. So think about, is it complicated, or is it relatively easy and straightforward for people to see some benefit from that? Then there's going to be people in an organization, again, depending upon the type of business, there is a natural fear of selling. Some people just aren't comfortable with it. Some people just don't see themselves as a salesperson, or want to see themselves in doing sales. So how do we help them overcome that fear, and to de-fear it, de-risk it for them, give them the confidence to do some of the things that we actually need them to do that won't make them feel as uncomfortable, but that will be in the back of people's minds. There'll be some people in an organization who say, well, it's just not my job. I'm not going to do it. It's not my job. This is my job. That's somebody else's job. And they will have boundaries that they just don't want to. They're not comfortable to overstep. So can we identify who those people are, and are there ways, strategies to work with them or get them to be a little bit more comfortable? I came across this in a previous organization. I came across people who said, well, actually, I believe that my clients think of me and see me as the expert, and I'm only comfortable to talk to them if I feel that I am the expert in that subject. So I'm not going to bring up a topic with them if I'm not seen as the expert for that. So that was a real individual barrier for them. I'm not sure whether or not their clients really do see them as the only experts in that domain, but that was their perception, that was their comfort factor. So trying to get them to move and say, actually, it's okay, it's safe to do different activities, again, was a real barrier. Then we come up against some assumptions. There's lots of assumptions that I hear within organizations. You might hear these within your own businesses. Sometimes people will be saying, Our clients know what we do. We know our clients really well. Our clients will come to us. There's that perceived intent or arrogance, or the way we view that relationship. Are we taking that for granted? And I'll give you an example that I came across a few years ago. I was in a multi-service organization. There was a company that I could see the data was suggesting that there was going to be a need for other services for them. My colleagues that were working with them in a different area were saying, no, they absolutely don't need that. We're talking to them. They don't need those services. There's no plans for that. They told me that the chief commercial officer knows them really well. They go out for quarterly lunches. They're always talking, etc., etc. 6 months later, we got a meeting finally with them. We did a capability presentation. And at the end of that presentation, the client turned around and said, I didn't know you did that. So like, wow, that's just 6-9 months we've just wasted, or all these barriers. Our clients don't know what we do, the full extent of the services. So we can't make those assumptions. So if you're hearing those assumptions, you really want to be challenging them, getting people to clarify and justify that further. And then I think considering the client's perspective, we said earlier on, what are we trying to achieve from this? We're trying to become sticky. We're trying to diversify, spread that risk within the client base. But what do clients want? As just mentioned with those assumptions, your clients, they will know you for what you have done, but they may not know you for what else you could do. And they're not looking at your website. They're not going on and being curious and wanting to understand what and where else could you help them. They're busy doing their day jobs. So we've got to be mindful that they're not aware of the greater capability that we could offer to them. And if we're not providing those services to them, they have other trusted providers who are. So why are they going to change? That almost brings you back into the world of the net new and having to overcome that and create that environment. So again, we've got to be mindful of that and think, well, how do we leverage those relationships to create those opportunities for us? Some organizations may not want the same provider for different services. We can be knocking on the door in all these different ways and guises, and it's just not what they want. Their strategy is to have a range of service providers. They're comfortable with that. There are other organizations that have gone the other extreme and said, actually, we want one service provider to do everything within a certain domain. So again, it's really understanding what is your client looking for? What are their buying habits? What's their procurement strategy? Where do you fit into that? And of course, if you're assigned to sell and provide different services, there's going to be different purchasers for those different services. It may not be the same person and may not be your point of contact. So we're having to develop those relationships and think about the strategy behind that. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment and just wonder if there's any thoughts, feedback, comments in the chat on some of those barriers. Some of those seem to resonate with some of the comments that were made earlier on Menti. Anything there that rings a bell you hadn't thought of, or any comments on those before we move on? So either put anything in the chat or feel free to come off mute and maybe a show of hands on through Teams if all those things seem to resonate. If any of those did resonate with you, think, yeah, that sounds like things that are going on within our organisation. We've seen those things before. Bronwyn, did you have a question? I think just saw a raised hand there.
No, sorry, I was meant to react. Apologies.
No problem at all. Okay. Right, let's move on. So I'm going to share with you again, when thinking from an organisational point of view, what are some of the things that companies have tried from a strategic perspective to say, right, this is our cross-selling strategy. So these are some things that I've observed that people have tried and failed when trying to turn this into reality. So often when an organisation says, top down, just go to our people, just go cross-sell. And that's the mandate. We need to go and cross-sell. We need to go and sell more to our existing clients. Well, if we haven't done some of those earlier things, if we haven't given people the tools, the training, the comfort, the motivation, they're not going to be prepared or able or comfortable to go and cross-sell. So just having a top-down go-do never works, and it will fail. expecting everyone within your business to be comfortable to do it. Again, for the reasons that we've mentioned earlier on, many people aren't going to be comfortable with this. It's just not within their natural DNA, or they need some support to help them, give them the tools in order to go and do what we need them to do. Some organizations will provide a one-off session to try to upskill you on the different services within the organization. This is what we do, this is A, B, and C, whatever. It's a tick box exercise. Great, everyone now knows what we do, now go cross-sell. It won't happen. Very little of that will resonate. People will get back to their desk, they will forget those things. So you've got to find a way to keep reinforcing that, keep reminding people. How do we get that change of behavior? That's really what we're trying to do. Mentioned before, having a very complicated reward scheme. It just doesn't work. It demotivates people. It makes more of a barrier. So think about, what is that reward mechanism, and how can we make that as simple and effective as possible? And lastly, some organizations just assume it will happen just by osmosis, just by goodwill. This is what we want. We're all on the same page. It won't happen, or it will happen in very sporadic amounts. So all of those things I've seen. There may be other strategies that you've come across, that you've tried, but we haven't been able to implement them with any real success. Is there anything else? Has anybody else come across any other strategies, or tried things that just haven't landed, or haven't had the level of traction that you would have liked or hoped? Or would that cover a number of things that you've maybe seen and tried within your own organizations?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I think for me it's been the sporadic nature of it. There's been is the direction of how and who and when and why, if that makes sense. Right. It's go and do this, and the next week is something else and a different challenge. So it's the continuity of going to the same targets and having the resource, I guess, to pivot, but to keep that momentum going.
Yeah. Got you. Yeah, no, absolutely. And sometimes you do see that there is can be a chop and change, and one week we're going this way, another week another way. So yeah, I think coming back to having a strategy. What is the plan, and how are we going to implement that? Okay, great, thank you. And look, I think that the truth is, winning more business from existing clients can be complex. It does take time and it does take effort. When it's done well, and when some of the things that we've spoken about are put in place, and we'll talk about some ideas for that in a moment, it can look incredibly easy, but only if all the building blocks are in place. But if it's not, then it's going to be a lot of effort. So I'm going to share with you some ideas and some tips to think about how can your businesses think about this in it slightly differently. So my top tips for you. So first, I think organizations need to really diagnose what is holding your business back, what is getting in the way, what is it that is motivating people, what's frustrating them, what do they need, what is holding our business back, what interventions do we then need that are going to make us more successful. So think about that diagnosis piece first. As mentioned right at the start, have a strategy that can think about, well, which clients are we going to go after, what solutions have we got, who is actually best placed within our business to lead the charge on that? How are we going to do that? What are the tactics that we've got? What are the marketing materials that we've got? Again, is this at an organizational level, at a practice level, at an account level? What's our strategy to do that? A starting point to think, well, where do these opportunities actually exist? I used to call this a gap analysis, and I'll kind of share with you what I mean, but I've changed my thought process around this a little bit. But very simply, in a spreadsheet or a table, put your service lines across the top, your clients down the side, and then we can populate, well, which clients and which services are we providing. So that's where we're currently working with them, or maybe where we've historically worked with them. So obviously all the gaps in that, that's our gap analysis. That shows us where those gaps in those services are, which I now think of actually, that's showing me where the opportunities are. So I think of this now as more of an opportunity analysis. So at least I can now ask the question, go, client A, okay, I'm working with them in service A and service C. Why aren't we working with them in service B and service D? Where are they? What do they need? Do they need it? How do we start that conversation? And it brings a focus to what activity that I can then go and do, or create a conversation around that. So even something as simple as this just provides a focus and enables you to build a strategy around how you're going to start to support that client, or at least to just ask the question. It may be you realize actually the client just doesn't need this service, so let's not waste our time and energy on this. It's not relevant at this point in time. Let's move on and put our time and energy elsewhere. So maybe start with that. I know some people also refer to this as kind of creating white space or understanding that white space. I'd just be interested again in the chat or with hands up. Is that an exercise that you've done or you do within your organizations or not? Julia, you putting your thumb up there. Was that saying you do it or?
Sporadically, yes, but again, it's sporadic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's often the thing. It's how to overcome that sort of sporadicity and to get the consistency in a process. So we're building this into how you are working. So after then, kind of next point. Maybe change the name. Mentioned earlier on, some people just aren't comfortable with this idea of cross-selling, and even saying cross-selling is going to make some people run with fear. So change the name, rebrand it within your organization. What is it that we're talking about? Is it about client development? Is it referrals? Is it introductions? Is there a softer terminology that may make it less fearful for some people? It's fundamentally the same thing and what we want them to do, but it may make it just a bit easier for them to do that. Identify the people that are most likely to engage in these activities. Not everyone in your business is going to be comfortable with or capable to go and do cross-selling and looking for referrals and making these introductions. So maybe start small. Who are the best people? Who are people that already exhibit those kind of behaviors and that kind of personality? And then upskill those people. Give them the tools, give them the mindset, the skill set, so they can go and do it. And I'd say actually you need to make them comfortable that they do not need to sell in order to cross-sell. If anything, I would say you don't want them to sell because they won't know that product or service or have all the, be able to overcome all the objections. So actually, we don't want people selling things that they are not comfortable to sell. So it is more around giving them the tools of, well, what questions can they ask when they're talking to clients? What information, what are the buying signals, what are the hooks that they should be listening for when they are talking to their customers? And enable and empower them to make the referral. They're talking to a client, so we have a team that does that. That's your problem. I understand that. Let me introduce you to somebody. Let me bring in my colleague that really is the expert in that. So if that's the starting point, if we can get people to be doing that more, give them the tools, the information, the confidence, you're going to start to see more conversations happening. Then really think about how do we invest in the internal relationships? Who are the people within our organization? Where is the best synergy between different services, between different practices? Where are they most aligned? You might have some practices that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. There will be some that actually work very closely together and do collaborate. So maybe work on those ones first, get those working really well together, really tight, and identify who can you help first, and then who can help you. I've always found it's worked for me. If I can give first and maybe take or gain later, has always worked well. So who can I help? Who is in the organization where I think there's a natural synergy, and how can we make that a two-way relationship as that relationship evolves, as we understand each other, learn about our businesses, but invest in those internal relationships. Find a way to reward the behaviors and to recognize the outcomes, but make it simple. Equally, you want to avoid, I've seen in many referral schemes, people trying to lay claim to referred business that they had nothing to do with. It was very tenuous. So it does need some management and some parameters around it, but you really do want to think about how can we reward that and recognize people and share the success and share these stories internally. I think when you're telling these stories of, well, who was involved? How did it happen? What was the conversation? Other people will learn from you and learn together and realize actually that wasn't so difficult, or actually I could do that. So again, helps to de-fear it for them and they can see the results. So more of sharing that success and sharing those stories. Using data to drive these actions, whether that's using the opportunity analysis, using account plans, using market intel, using contacts and relationships, seeing that your colleague they are connected to somebody within the organization that you want to speak to. So there's a lot of different data that you could be using that's going to help you to drive those actions, be very specific over what do we want to do with who and how. So how are we using data to drive those actions forward? And these activities really should be aligned around your customer's journey. Your customer, they are trying to go from A to D, as an example. You might be supporting them going from A to B. Well, how do we help them to go from B to C? Do we have the services? Do we have the expertise? Do they even know that we can help them with that? So how do we start sowing that seed? How do we start to help them anticipate what their future need is going to be and help them overcome some of the problems that they might face? So do we really understand the customer's journey, and how are we trying to help them achieve their goals? And that will align with all these different and other activities. And then lastly, you, as an organization at a higher level, really think about how do we improve our clients' awareness of our own capabilities? And this could be through marketing, through thought leadership, through people asking questions and finding out, well, what else do you need? And did you know? So that there's a huge investment in that. Clients won't remember all of these things all of the time. So there is a constant, how do we improve that awareness? And that's driven from a number of different factors. So again, let me just pause for a moment there, kind of shared with you kind of 10, 11 key things that I've observed. Any thoughts on that? Anything stand out from you? Anything you hadn't considered, or anything else you would add to that?
Can I ask a bit of a question, Darren?
Yes, of course.
When it comes to the last point, actually, about improving client awareness of capabilities, because it's something that I think you said earlier, that we assume that people know what we do, and we have this conversation with one or two people, and then we send a follow-up, and they have the source document, then it gets lost in the inbox or the files, or it's to the wrong person. How many times is it acceptable, without being rude, when you're repeating yourself over and over again to demonstrate those capabilities? Because I sometimes find it, you think it's resonated, but then you have another conversation, and you think you've had a great call, great meeting,
yeah.
and then they don't actually remember it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I refer, people are often saying now, even from a new business point of view, that it could take 8 to 10 interactions before a client engages. And I think you also want to think, when we are interacting, can we go in with a slightly different message? You don't want to just be repeating yourself the same message over and over and over again. But how do we communicate it in a slightly different way? Is there a different format? Is it thought leadership? Is it from social media? Is it doing a webinar? Is it something else? And different forms of communication, it needs a multi-channel approach. Are they better at responding on WhatsApp or text or via email? So think about, what are they likely to respond to, and what are the different channels that you can use to communicate, and vary the theme. So again, different things will resonate with them at different times, but hopefully it builds into their subconscious, and at some point they will hopefully remember that, and it will come back. But it is a constant process. You can never say, yes, this client knows us inside out, back to front, job done, because they're busy, they're doing other things. So there needs to be a constant process and keeping it fresh and keeping it real. And sometimes you also need to repeat yourself. 6 months down the line, they're not going to remember what you told them 6 months ago. So maybe we can repurpose and redo, have a different campaign, and it may feel a bit fresher or more relevant to them at that point in time.
Brilliant, thanks.
Any other, just seeing some of the comments there, David's insurance companies spend 8% of their new effort looking for new business rather than retaining business. Yeah, I think lots of people do invest a lot of time in that. Craig, you've said clients will know you for what you were delivering when they first met you. Yeah, absolutely. Breaking out of that mold, of that square peg in a square hole. How do we get them to think of us and know us for other things? It's challenging, but it takes time and effort. And if you think about, have a bit of a strategy and plan, you can crack that nut. But often a lot of people do give up, and they'll do the transactional project and move on, because it does seem like a bit too much hard work. But if you do persevere, actually you can open that up, and it can be very rewarding. So look, I think with the right mindset, tool set, skill set, for your people, you will identify more of these opportunities. and that puts you in a better position to win more business from your existing clients. So just a bit by way of a summary, and kind of how can we help? We work with organizations on their strategy. Well, what are we doing? How are we doing these things? We work to upskill people, and we provide consultancy support to help organizations and individuals on those journeys.